think for a moment about electricity. You know, that thing that's just always there when you need it.
Right. Instant power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For your phone, the lights, everything, it feels infinite, almost magical. But have you ever really stopped to think about the massive, invisible network behind it?
It's easy to take for granted.
Totally. The U.S. electric grid, I mean, it's not just wires and poles. People call it one of the largest and most complex machines on Earth. Seriously complex.
It's an incredible feat of engineering, built up over decades.
Absolutely. But that complexity, and maybe its age, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Is this huge machine built for, a different time, really ready for what's coming next? The future demands.
And that's the crux of the issue, isn't it? That's the core challenge we're grappling with right now, and it seems to be accelerating.
Right?
This vast grid, which, let's be clear, has served us incredibly well, is now facing pressures it just wasn't designed for. Not really.
What kind of pressures are we talking about?
We're talking about, well, the explosion of new technologies.
Yeah.
Think about the sheer energy appetite of artificial intelligence.
AI, yeah. Huge computational needs.
Huge. And then there's high-performance computing, crypto mining, this whole growing digital world that needs constant, utterly reliable power.
So it's not just more power, it's a different kind of demand.
Exactly. It's not just about quantity. It's about demanding unprecedented levels of reliability, speed, and maybe most importantly, resilience. Resilience against new kinds of threats, new kinds of demands.
Okay.
So modernization, it
Yeah.
isn't just about growth anymore. It's becoming a matter of national importance. Economic security, technological leadership, it all ties back to the grid.
That really frames it differently. And, that's exactly where we're going today in this deep dive. We're going to explore a really radical idea, maybe even a bit counterintuitive.
Definitely sounds that way at first.
It's about using blockchain technology to fundamentally transform, maybe even strengthen, this vital U.S. energy grid.
Blockchain, the tech behind Bitcoin and NFTs.
The very same. We usually think digital currencies, right? But today, we're looking at how it's being proposed as a potential game changer for something incredibly physical, our power supply.
It's a fascinating jump.
Yeah, and we're drawing on some interesting perspectives here. Insights from Cosmo Jiang, he's a general partner at the venture capital firm Pantera. And also, we're looking at strategic priorities outlined directly by the White House.
So, venture capital meeting national strategy.
Seems like it. Okay, so let's unpack this. How can blockchain, something born in the digital world, actually, light up the future of our physical infrastructure?
Well, what's really striking, I think, is the sheer vision behind it. It's such a departure from how we normally think about building big infrastructure.
Right, usually big companies, government projects.
Exactly. Centralized planning, massive capital expenditure. This idea flips that script. We're talking about a potential paradigm shift where individual actions, literally things everyday people might do in their own homes.
Like installing solar panels.
Like installing solar panels or batteries, yeah. Those individual actions, incentivized by digital tokens, could add up. They could cumulatively build national-scale infrastructure.
Wow. So individuals building the grid, essentially.
Yeah, in a decentralized way.
Yeah.
And the promise here isn't just adding more capacity. It's about reshaping the grid fundamentally. And maybe the most surprising part, potentially cutting through some of the bureaucratic red tape.
Ah, the red tape.
Ooh.
Always a factor.
Always. That massive capital investment hurdle that slows down these huge infrastructure projects. This approach might offer a way around some of that. It's really about leveraging decentralized coordination for a traditionally very centralized problem.
Okay, this is definitely radical. Let's dig in.
Yeah.
So maybe before we get to the blockchain solution, let's really spend some time on the problem itself, because you really need to grasp the immense strain on the grid, both now and what's coming, to see why people are even considering such a radical idea.
Absolutely. Understanding the why is crucial here.
You mentioned the grid is under increasing pressure. What are the main drivers? You said AI, high-performance computing.
Right. It's primarily this explosion of energy-intensive industries.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about AI or crypto mining or these other high-performance computing applications, we're not just talking software anymore, are we?
No, it's hardware, massive hardware.
Exactly. Huge physical installations, data centers packed with servers, GPU clusters for AI training, specialized rigs for crypto mining. And these things need a constant, absolutely colossal amount of power.
24/7.
24/7, 365. No breaks. And that's the key difference.
How so? Different from, say, factories or something.
Well, yeah. Historically, the grid was designed to manage fluctuations, industrial loads during the day, residential peaks in the evening, commercial use. There were patterns, peaks, and troughs.
Right. You could sort of predict it.
You could predict it, plan for it. But think about training a really complex AI model that can involve running millions, maybe billions of calculations simultaneously, nonstop for weeks or even months.
Wow. Okay.
Or crypto mining operations. They run continuously at maximum capacity to be profitable. It's not an intermittent draw like turning on your air conditioning for a few hours. It's a constant high-density power demand.
High density, meaning a lot of power in one place.
Precisely. Often in very concentrated geographic locations. Take a large AI data center, for example. We're talking potentially thousands upon thousands of powerful GPUs running flat out. Such a facility could easily consume as much electricity as a small city.
A whole city, seriously.
Yeah, I think maybe 50 to 100,000 people. In terms of power, that could be 100, maybe 200 megawatts or even more. And that's baseline, continuous draw.
That's staggering.
It is. And this kind of concentrated, persistent demand puts a unique, unprecedented strain on the existing grid infrastructure. It pushes substations, transmission lines, everything, right to their limits. And it exposes vulnerabilities that maybe weren't as obvious with more traditional energy use patterns.
So weaknesses in the system become clearer.
Definitely. It's like constantly redlining an engine that was built for cruising speed. It's not just about flipping a light switch anymore. It's about feeding this ravenous digital beast that literally never sleeps.
And meeting that demand, that sheer capacity need is one thing. But you also mentioned resilience. It's not just if the power is there, but how reliable, how robust the system is.
Exactly. That's become a huge part of the conversation. It's moved beyond just, can we generate enough megawatts, to how fundamentally strong and reliable is the entire system, especially when our most critical technologies, our economic drivers, increasingly depend on it being uninterrupted.
So it's a strategic issue now.
Absolutely. The conversation has definitely shifted. It's gone from primarily capacity planning to focusing on grid strength and reliability as, well, national strategic imperatives.
And you mentioned the White House perspective.
Yes. The Trump administration's America's AI Action Plan, for instance, explicitly calls out maximizing grid uptime and resiliency as being central to its strategy. The goal is making the U.S. the global leader in AI.
And you can't do that if the power keeps flickering off.
Precisely. It's not just about, economic competition, though that's obviously a huge part of it. It's viewed as a matter of national security and maintaining that technological edge. If your foundational energy infrastructure is shaky or vulnerable,
Then your cutting-edge tech is vulnerable too.
by extension, yes, your AI systems, the things meant to ensure that leadership, become inherently fragile. You can't really claim global AI dominance if the computational backbone it relies on is susceptible to outages, whether that's from, say, extreme weather, cyber attacks, or even just old equipment failing under strain.
Okay, so resilience is paramount.
Yeah.
What does that actually look like in terms of policy? What are the specific recommendations to make the grid tougher?
Well, the recommendations aim for a pretty multifaceted approach. They recognize there isn't just one single threat. So they talk about things like exploring nuclear energy generation.
Your reliable baseload power.
Exactly. Consistent, high-output power that isn't dependent on weather conditions, providing that stable foundation. But it's not just about generation. There's a strong focus on protecting what we already have.
How so?
Things like shielding existing grid components from electromagnetic disruption.
Electromagnetic, like solar flares? Or something else?
Both, potentially.
Yeah.
Natural phenomena like major solar flares can induce currents, GICs they call them, geomagnetically induced currents. They can fry large transformers, really critical, hard-to-replace components. But it also includes potential man-made threats, like targeted EMP attacks. Either could cause widespread, devastating grid collapse.
Okay, that sounds serious. Shielding makes sense. What else?
Perhaps the most critical piece, tying back to that AI reliance, is building redundant energy systems and ensuring that critical backups are always available.
Redundancy. So no single point of failure.
That's the goal. This focus on redundancy and backups is absolutely vital for AI and other critical infrastructure. I mean, just imagine, what if a massive AI model is in the middle of a crucial months-long training run?
And the power cuts out.
Even for a few minutes. Or think about national defense systems relying on continuous computation. The consequences aren't just inconvenience. You could have catastrophic cascading failures across complex systems, huge data loss, major operational setbacks.
So the aim is a grid that can handle shocks.
Exactly. A grid where if one part goes down a power plant, a transmission line, Other parts can immediately pick up the slack. It ensures continuous, uninterrupted operation for those really sensitive computations and essential services. It's a holistic approach trying to minimize or eliminate any single point where the whole system could break.
It makes you wonder, can we really solidify that global leadership in AI without this kind of fundamentally tougher energy backbone?
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? Can we do it relying only on these traditional centralized ways of hardening the grid? Especially when the demands themselves are becoming more distributed and complex, it really sets the stage for exploring alternatives.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Which brings us right back to this radical idea from Cosmo Jiang at Pantera. If the current system is this giant top-down centralized machine, he's suggesting something completely different, right? Using blockchain to build a new kind of energy network.
That's the core proposal, building something decentralized from the ground up.
It still feels like such an odd pairing, though. Digital ledgers and physical power lines. How does blockchain actually fit in? What's the mechanism?
Yeah, it does seem counterintuitive at first glance, doesn't it? We're just so used to associating blockchain with, Bitcoin, maybe digital art, DeFi,
Yeah, finance mostly.
mostly finance or digital assets.
Hmm.
But the underlying principle Jiang highlights is really profound. He talks about the coordination of incentives.
Coordination of incentives.
Yeah, he has this quote. It's quite powerful. All of civilization from the beginning of time has been built on the coordination of incentives, and blockchain is just a new way to incentivize people in a decentralized way that wasn't possible before.
Huh. Okay, unpack that a bit. How does blockchain incentivize differently?
Well, think about how big infrastructure projects normally get built. You need massive amounts of capital, usually from governments or huge corporations. You need government mandates, incredibly complex contracts, project managers. It all relies on central authorities, large entities making decisions and managing funds.
And trust. Trust in those central parties.
A huge amount of trust. And it takes time, negotiation, approvals. Blockchain introduces a fundamentally different way to handle the incentive part. It allows for automated, transparent, and this is key, trustless distribution of rewards.
Trustless, meaning you don't need to trust anyone.
Not quite anyone. It means you don't need to trust a specific central intermediary, like a bank or a project manager, to handle the transaction fairly. You trust the underlying code, the cryptography of the blockchain network itself, which is designed to be tamper-proof and transparent.
Okay, so the network itself enforces the rules.
Exactly. Every contribution, maybe it's surplus energy from your solar panels, maybe it's capacity from your home battery, gets recorded immutably on this shared digital ledger. It's validated by the network, not just sitting in some company's private database.
And everyone can see it.
Potentially, depending on the design. But the key is cryptographic verification. This enables these open, programmable systems. Individuals can contribute resources, perform actions, and be automatically compensated, often in tokens, in a way that's verifiable and reliable without needing a middleman to approve every single microtransaction.
Which could speed things up dramatically.
Potentially, yes. And it opens up completely new ways for individuals to participate and even earn revenue from their assets.
So the blockchain basically acts as this impartial scorekeeper, tracking all these distributed contributions and paying people out automatically.
That's a good way to put it. An impartial, automated, transparent scorekeeper and payment system.
And you mentioned Jiang draws a parallel to the gig economy. How does that fit?
Right. He makes that direct comparison. Think about platforms like Uber or DoorDash. They created ways for individuals to monetize their spare time, their car, their bike resources they already had outside of a traditional job.
Okay, yeah, using idle resources.
Exactly. Jiang's insight is that blockchain can apply a similar principle to coordinate, as he puts it, unused infrastructure, labor, and resources, but for building out an energy grid.
Unused infrastructure, like roof space for solar.
Right.
Or battery capacity.
Precisely. Instead of relying solely on giant utilities planning and building massive multi-billion-dollar power plants projects that can take literally decades from conception to operation.
Yeah, the planning and permitting alone.
It's immense. Instead, blockchain protocols can create these immediate granular incentives, encouraging ordinary people, households, businesses to contribute directly to the grid's capacity and its resilience. It essentially turns their homes or businesses into potential micropower plants or storage depots.
Okay, let's get concrete. How would these token incentives actually work for me, an average person? If I put solar panels on my roof, how do I get tokens?
Right, so Jiang talks about specific protocols. Think of these as software applications running on a blockchain, often using something called smart contracts.
Smart contracts, heard of those. They're like self-executing agreements.
Exactly. code that automatically enforces the terms of an agreement. So let's say you install those solar panels. You're already getting benefits like lower electricity bills, maybe some local credits for selling power back. But a blockchain protocol could add another layer.
How?
For every kilowatt hour of surplus energy your panels generate and feed back into the grid, a smart contract linked to this protocol could automatically send a certain number of specific energy tokens directly to your digital wallet,
Instantly.
potentially instantly, or very close to it. Or maybe you install a home battery system. The grid operator, perhaps via this protocol, signals a need for extra power during a peak demand event, like a really hot afternoon when everyone's AC is blasting. Your battery could be configured to automatically discharge some stored power back to the grid to help stabilize it. And boom, the smart contract verifies this contribution and sends you tokens as compensation.
So it's a direct, real-time financial incentive to help the grid.
Exactly. Direct, immediate, transparent. It encourages investment in these distributed resources, solar, batteries, maybe even smart thermostats that help manage demand and rewards active participation in maintaining grid stability. It fundamentally changes the relationship from passive consumer to active participant.
So you're not just using power, you're potentially providing it and getting rewarded in a new way.
Precisely. It transforms passive energy consumers into what people are calling prosumers, individuals who both produce and consume energy.
Prosumers, I like that.
And they're directly contributing to and benefiting from the grid's overall health and capacity.
So instead of one company deciding, we need a giant new plant over here, which costs billions and takes forever, it's more like millions of individual choices, guided by these token incentives adding up to create this distributed network.
That's the vision. You create this energy grid that isn't centralized and deployed through heavy capital expenditure by just a few big players. It becomes instead a networked sum of individual contributions.
That bottom-up grid.
Essentially, yes, a fundamental shift from that top-down, capital-intensive model to a bottom-up, incentive-driven, highly distributed one, almost like a peer-to-peer energy marketplace where the rules are set and enforced by the blockchain protocol.
It sounds incredibly powerful, but
Yeah.
what about the challenges? You mentioned scalability earlier. Can millions of little contributions really add up to replace a major power plant?
That's one of the absolutely critical questions. Scalability is a huge hurdle. How do you effectively onboard potentially millions of individuals and their devices onto these systems? How do you ensure cybersecurity for every single connected device, every solar inverter, every smart battery? That's a massive attack surface if not secured properly.
Yeah, security is crucial.
And what about interoperability? Will different protocols from different companies be able to talk to each other? Will it work seamlessly across different regions with different grid operators and regulations? These are significant technical and logistical challenges.
And the energy use of blockchain itself, isn't that sometimes criticized?
That's a fair point, and it's definitely been a concern, especially with older proof-of-work blockchains like Bitcoin's original design. However, many newer blockchain technologies use much more energy-efficient consensus mechanisms, like proof-of-stake. So the energy footprint depends heavily on the specific blockchain being used. The protocols Jiang envisions would likely utilize these more efficient methods.
Okay, so the tech is evolving.
It is. But the challenges aren't just technical. You also need supportive regulatory frameworks, or you need industry standards. And you need to demonstrate that this distributed network can truly provide the kind of reliable, dispatchable power needed to meet national demands, especially during emergencies. Can it really rival the guaranteed output of a traditional power plant when you absolutely need it?
Lots of questions still.
Definitely. It's a compelling vision, but the path from concept to widespread reality involves overcoming some pretty complex hurdles. It's not just plug and play yet.
Okay, so acknowledging those hurdles, scalability, security, regulation, if this approach can overcome them, it seems to offer two really compelling advantages. The first one feels almost obvious, a massive boost in grid resilience.
Right. That's probably the most immediate and intuitive benefit.
Yeah, it's like you said earlier, moving from that single big castle strong maybe, but a single target, to having like a million interconnected little fortresses if one gets hit, or several.
The network keeps functioning, the system survives.
It feels like a fundamental change in how you even think about infrastructure security.
It really is a paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm.
And that direct link between decentralization and grid strength is, I think, one of the strongest arguments in favor of exploring this. Jiang's conclusion is blunt. This type of energy decentralization strengthens the grid.
Why, technically, what makes it inherently stronger?
It comes down to eliminating, or at least drastically minimizing, those single points of failure. In our traditional centralized grid, you have critical bottlenecks, a major power plant going offline due to equipment failure, a key transmission corridor being knocked out by a storm like a hurricane or an ice storm we see increasingly often.
Or even an attack, cyber or physical.
Absolutely. A coordinated attack on a few critical substations could, in theory, cascade and take down power for millions. The system has inherent vulnerabilities because of its centralized choke points.
Okay.
But with a decentralized model, where power generation and storage are spread across potentially millions of locations, homes, businesses, community microgrids, the impact of losing any single node, or even a small cluster of nodes, is significantly reduced.
It's absorbed by the rest of the network.
Exactly. You have redundancy built into the very architecture. It's not just one backup generator somewhere. The distributed nature itself provides resilience. If your neighbor's solar panels get disconnected or a local battery bank has an issue, there are countless other points feeding into and drawing from the grid nearby.
Which ties right back into that White House goal you mentioned.
Precisely. Building redundant energy systems to ensure maximum grid uptime and resiliency. This decentralized approach achieves that redundancy almost organically by distributing the assets themselves. It creates a network that's inherently more robust, less brittle, and much harder to cripple through localized shocks or even widespread coordinated disruptions.
That kind of distributed resilience, it feels like something that would be incredibly expensive, maybe impossible to achieve just by hardening a purely centralized system.
It would be phenomenally expensive, yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to fortify every single potential failure point in a vast centralized network is a monumental task. Decentralization offers a different path to resilience.
Okay, so that's the resilience benefit. Very powerful. But then there's the second advantage Jiang points to, which frankly sounds almost more surprising: cutting through regulatory red tape.
Yeah, that one raises eyebrows, right?
Totally. Because large infrastructure projects, especially energy ones in the US, are just notorious for getting bogged down for years, sometimes decades, in regulations and permits. How could a blockchain approach possibly help with that?
It's a fascinating argument. The idea isn't just that decentralization is a technical upgrade. It's also presented as a structural one that might navigate those policy hurdles more nimbly. Jiang is quite direct, saying this approach cuts through the regulatory red tape.
And that's important
Because, as we noted, regulatory streamlining is explicitly named by the Trump administration as one of the 3 pillars of its AI action plan. They recognize that bureaucratic delays can be a major barrier to deploying the infrastructure needed for technological leadership. So finding ways to speed things up is seen as strategically vital.
Okay, but how? Does blockchain magically make environmental reviews disappear? Or bypass safety checks? That seems unlikely and maybe undesirable.
No, it's not about eliminating necessary oversight like safety or environmental standards. It's more about changing the scale and nature of the regulatory process it interacts with.
How so?
Think about getting approval for a massive new nuclear plant, or a huge wind farm spanning multiple counties, or a major high-voltage transmission line crossing state borders. These trigger incredibly complex, multi-layered reviews, federal permits, state utility commission approvals, local zoning, years of environmental impact studies, public hearings, often land acquisition battles.
Right, a huge, slow, expensive process designed for massive centralized projects.
Exactly. But what happens when the project isn't one giant power plant, but rather millions of individual homeowners deciding to install solar panels or a battery?
Ah, okay. The scale of approval shifts.
It shifts dramatically.
Yeah.
You still need things like local building permits, electrical codes, safety inspections for the installation, maybe standardized rules for connecting to the local grid. But you likely wouldn't need the same kind of overarching federal environmental impact statement or state-level utility commission approval for each individual rooftop system.
So millions of smaller, simpler approvals instead of one giant, complex one.
Potentially. The administrative burden is distributed and perhaps significantly lessened compared to the colossal task of permitting a single gigawatt-scale facility. The token incentives, operating as a market signal, coordinate these individual actions more efficiently than a top-down mandate needing layers of bureaucratic sign-offs for every phase.
So it's like innovation, driven by individual incentives, can move faster than the traditional, slower processes designed for huge, centralized builds.
That seems to be the argument. that this bottom-up, market-driven approach enabled by blockchain's incentive coordination could potentially bypass some of the deepest parts of the regulatory quagmire that stalls large projects. It raises a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Could this model, using blockchain incentives to coordinate distributed, individual contributions, offer a template for other areas stuck in infrastructure bottlenecks? Think about, say, rolling out broadband internet to underserved rural areas, or building out networks of EV chargers, or even developing smarter city infrastructure. Could a similar bottom-up incentivized approach accelerate progress there too?
That is a fascinating thought. Applying this beyond just energy? Wow. Okay, that really broadens the perspective. So let's try and pull this all together. We've covered a lot of ground today.
We certainly have. It's a dense topic.
Yeah. We started with this urgent, almost unprecedented need to modernize the U.S. energy grid. It's facing these huge new demands, especially from AI and high-performance computing, demanding not just more power, but way more resilience.
A grid built for the 20th century meeting 21st century demands.
Exactly. And then we dove into this pretty radical proposal using blockchain. Not for crypto, but as a novel way to actually build and strengthen the grid itself.
Through that decentralized, incentive-driven participation, using tokens to encourage individuals to add solar, add batteries.
Right, turning potentially millions of homes and businesses into active parts of the grid. And we saw the two big potential payoffs from that approach. First, that massive increase in resilience, the million fortresses idea, distributing the assets to avoid single points of failure.
Which directly aligns with stated national priorities for grid security.
And second, this surprising potential benefit of cutting through some of the regulatory friction, the red tape, that so often slows down these massive traditional infrastructure builds.
By shifting the scale of deployment and leveraging market-like incentives.
It really feels like we're seeing how these intense new energy needs are forcing us to think way outside the box, pushing the boundaries, and maybe a technology like blockchain, which seems unrelated, might actually hold an unexpected key.
It certainly brings the conversation down to a very personal level, doesn't it? This isn't just about abstract policy or massive power plants miles away.
No, it's about your roof, maybe your garage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It potentially changes how you as a listener interact with energy.
Yeah.
How your home could become an active contributor to vital national infrastructure. The idea that ordinary people spurred on by these new digital incentives could become crucial building blocks of the energy grid.
Yeah.
That's a truly revolutionary concept.
It flips the script on how we think about building big things.
Completely. It suggests a future where civic contribution, maybe even national development, takes on this entirely new, digitally coordinated, decentralized form.
So maybe final thought for people to chew on after listening.
Yeah, maybe consider this. If the future of our energy security, maybe even our nation's technological edge in areas like AI, could genuinely rest on a network built not just by giant corporations or government programs, but by millions upon millions of individual actions, all coordinated by software, by code. What does that fundamentally do to our whole understanding of infrastructure?
How we define it, how we build it.
Exactly. And pushing that thought further, what other complex centralized systems in our society, things that seem too big, too slow, too bogged down, might actually be ripe for a similar kind of decentralized revolution? Where could collective individual action, empowered by smart, transparent incentive, reshape our world next?